It was the 20th of December 1984. 12-year-old Jonelle Matthews was excited for Christmas and also taking part at the Christmas choir concert, which she was singing in for Franklin Middle School Choir, which was also to be televised. Jonelle had an older sister, and they lived with their parents Jim and Gloria in Greeley, Colorado. Jonelle was described as the life and soul of the party and kind-hearted. Her parents said about her that if there was anyone in the room, you definitely knew that she was there. At this time, Gloria was away visiting parents for the Christmas holidays, and Jim was looking after his two daughters. It was on this night of the 20th that life would change for the Matthews family, and it would be 35 years before there would be any answers. Whilst at the concert, Jonelle's father Jim had to watch his other daughter at the basketball game, so had to arrange for Jonelle to ride home with her friend Deanne and father Russell Ross. After the concert, the girls were excitedly chatting away about Christmas, and then Russell pulled up to Jonelle's house. It was 8:15, and they said their goodbyes, and Russell watched Jonelle go into the house and switch on the indoor lights on, at which point Russell drove away. They didn't know it yet, but Russell and his daughter would be the last people to see Jonelle alive. At 8:30, it was established that Jonelle had taken a phone call from a colleague of Jim's, and Jonelle told them that her father would be home soon. By the time it was 9:30, Jim had come home. He noticed the garage doors open, but there was no answer from Jonelle. Where Jonelle usually sits in the TV room was set up, with her pillow and a space heater next to where she sits to keep her warm. Jim at this point thinks that maybe she's visiting a neighbour. Just before 10 p.m, Jennifer comes home. Jim asks if she'd seen Jonelle. When Jennifer replies that she hasn't, Jim is worried. At 10:15, Greeley police respond and begin their search, starting with the neighbours. Gloria by now has arrived in California, and once she gets news of missing Jonelle, she immediately catches the next plane home. Although there was no forced entry, police did notice footprints in the snow, and areas where the footprints had been raked over as if to cover the footprints. The case gained nationwide attention. Jonelle's picture was put on a milk carton, and the President Ronald Reagan mentions Jonelle's case during a speech for missing and exploited children. Eventually, Jonelle could not be found, and the case became cold until January 2019, bones were found 20 miles away from Greeley in Weld County. At a construction site for oil and gas, workers came across skeletal remains. Dental records proved that it was Jonelle, and remnants of fabric from the clothing she was wearing at the Christmas concert were identical, and it was clear that Jonelle had been shot in the head. It wasn't until October 2020, a man called Steve Pankey was arrested for kidnap and murder. So far, he had denied having anything to do with Jonelle, let alone her murder. However, Steve Pankey became number one suspect because throughout the years he inserted himself wherever possible into the investigation. He was described by people who knew him as eccentric and obsessed with Jonelle's case, accusing others as the murderer, but also listing himself as a suspect to the police. People that knew him over the years certainly didn't have a lot of good things to say. He was someone that would always harass and stalk and cause trouble if you wronged him in any way. Interestingly, Pankey was a candidate for governor in Idaho twice. Whilst living at Greeley at the same time as the Matthews family, Steve had also attended the same church, but from what I can gather, Stephen had been kicked out of the church before the Matthews family had joined. Jim Matthews states that they didn't even know who he was. That wasn't the same for Russell Ross, however, as Steve Pankey seemed to hold a vendetta against Ross, who was Pankey's former boss. There is an interview with Steve Pankey talking about the case years earlier before he got arrested, as it seemed that he was always a person of interest, purely because of the way Steve Pankey inserted himself where Jonelle's case was concerned. And Pankey would say that the police had it against him because he was gay. Ex-wife Angela Hicks, who had 2 children by Steve, testified against him and said that the day after Jonelle Matthews went missing, Steve, who had been very controlling in the relationship, to the point they couldn't have TV or radio on in the house, suddenly wanted to visit his parents in Big Bear in Northern California. So Angela had to stay up all night of the 21st of December to pack because it was such a spontaneous trip. And they had to leave on the 22nd of December. This had never happened before. Angela had mentioned they had never been on trips before with Steve and the kids, and so was taken by surprise at this sudden trip. Steve Pankey, however, contradicts this. In an interview he gave years earlier, he said that it was a planned trip, but you'll find that he contradicts himself a lot throughout the interview, with media and with the police years later, and also in court. To date, Steve Pankey was on trial throughout October and November 2021, but the jury couldn't reach a unanimous verdict, and a retrial will be set at a later date. Meanwhile, bond for Steve Pankey is set for $5 million.